This podcast show is brought to you by Northern Bee Books, publishers of new and second-hand bee books. Founded in 1976, Northern Bee Books claim to stock the largest collection of new and old bee books in the English-speaking world. They also publish the Beekeepers Quarterly and Natural Bee Husbandry magazines. Visit northernbeebooks.co.uk to view their book list. Welcome to the KM148 Bay. This is episode 148 of our beekeeping show. You betcha, troubling times in South Dakota.
We are Gary
and Margaret.
We are Kiwimana, and Kiwimana are beekeepers from the hills of the Waitaki Ranges on the wild west coast of Auckland in the North Island of New Zealand.
Yes, we build and sell beekeeping equipment and bees, provide beekeeper services and education.
In this episode, we learn about an Iranian startup creating smart beehives and why are all the bees dying in South Dakota. And the show notes for this podcast are kiwi.bz/148.
G'day, Gary. How you doing?
You're from Australia now.
Yeah.
So, what's happening, Margaret?
Oh, Gary. Well, I think the thing that's happening is getting me quite depressed. Constant rain, grey skies, thunder and lightning. Oh, it's been very stressful.
I don't think it's not rained for the last 3 weeks, is it?
It's just been on, and the temperatures seem to be dropping more than they're going up, and we're supposed to be in spring.
Yes, I know. It's crazy, isn't it? So what do you think people should be doing with their hives at this time of the year, Margaret?
Yeah, well, as we are now in New Zealand and we are coming into spring, I think the most important thing, in my view, is assessment.
And what do you mean by that?
What do I mean by that? You ask, Gary?
I do.
Okay, well, basically a full inspection of your beehives required at the end of the season, and going in and looking at each frame one by one, then return it to the original position, and then do each box. And it's something I like to do to see the status of the hive after winter. I like to just look. I don't do any work unless it's vital. And I do the visual or take photos. And when I've done, I close up.
So this season assessment inspection gives the beekeeper a way to see how the colony did over winter. But why not take any action?
Okay, you sounded really enthusiastic with that question, Gary. Yeah, it's
I'm always enthusiastic.
Indeed. Well, end of season assessments, I think, should be done at the end of every season, like about 4 weeks before. And I think it's a crucial and key beehive management task for beekeepers, and especially when you're coming out of one season and going into the next. And the goal is to check the status of the hive as it is, then using what you're finding to assess and prepare for the work that you need to do. So simply, it's look, take note, and then close the hive. And for the beginner beekeeper, it takes a lot of pressure off because it gives them a great learning opportunity, but also it gives them a chance to just go in and have a look. It's about learning, and it's about looking to understand what they are seeing. They don't have to think about what they need to do about it. They just go in. They don't take any action. They just look.
So a bit of a recce.
Yeah, checking the perimeter, as it were.
Yeah.
So, beginner beekeepers can get overwhelmed, I reckon, and I know I did when I first started beekeeping, and sometimes having to make decisions on the fly, or on the bee, should I say, and they try to do everything at once, and so they get too overwhelmed. So this method allows space for the beginner to have a look, okay, and then they would go and analyse what they saw away from the hive, and having someone take notes or photos for you is really helpful. And if you're on your own, maybe use a frame holder to hold the frame. Then you can take photos of each side of the frame. So it's important to know which frame is which, and notes or photos should be taken in order from left to right, and then note frame 1, 2, 3, etc.
Yeah, so getting like an audit
Yeah, that's it. That's the right word. You got it.
Cool. So why bother with this? Why not just leave it to the girls to decide what to do?
Gary, that's a really good question. And I know there are folks who would just plonk some boxes on the top and then just leave them to it. But in my view, managing a honeybee colony in a country where Varroa destructor mite is present means that sadly with this parasite, it does not give the 21st century beekeeper the luxury of just leaving the girls to it like they used to be able to do it.
Okay, so once the hive's closed up, what do you do next?
Okay, so then you'd take all the notes or photos that you've taken, and if you've used a camera, you can use the zoom function on the camera and go through and identify what is on each frame. So you be aware of the position of the frame, and the assessment is the first step and analysis is the second step.
Very good.
Thank you.
And what's the third step?
Third step, this is what I recommend, that 2 weeks later you go in and see what has changed. So the changes will show you what the bees are up to, and with the understanding the changes that you see, it will help the beekeeper to know what work is required.
So what kind of things would you be expecting to see?
I think probably if we look at winter to spring, so there would be a smaller population through the end of winter, and then coming into spring you'd like to see increased laying and changes in the types of brood being laid. So, for example, there'll probably be the first flush of new worker brood being laid, and then you'll start to see some drone cells coming up. So basically what will happen is that once the analysis is done and then you go back and do the 2 weekly check, you can start to see what changes are. So if there's increased laying, you may want to look at, have they got enough room, what's going in the cells, and then the health of the new brood, make sure it's all healthy. And if it's, that time of the year, with spring, you want to get all your treatments done. And at the moment for us Kiwis, spring seems to be delayed and winter seems to be still here.
Yeah, winter seems to have come back, eh?
Yeah, it's so bizarre. And we're back down to single digits overnight, so that's not a good thing.
I know, we've run out of firewood, so the house is cold.
It is cold. Okay, so it's spring here in New Zealand, but what's happening around the world? Let's hear from our Kiwi mana roving reporters.
This week we hear from
Well, that was short and sweet, wasn't it, Gary?
we heard from no one. I know a couple of them are at Apiamondia, but where's the rest of them? I don't know.
Yes, well, there's maybe weather events happening out there, or the bees may be just relaxing after the season ends. So hopefully we'll hear from everybody next time, and we hope you're all okay, guys.
Absolutely, and we're always looking for new roving reporters, and especially from New Zealand or Australia or the UK or Canada.
Anywhere, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to be a roving reporter?
Yes, you do.
It would be awesome if you could help create the buzz by being part of the show, reporting in from your location while in the field. If so, could you record a quick update, 1 to 2 minutes of your local weather conditions and what people should be doing with your bees in your area, and email that to gary@kiwimana.co.nz, or there's a link there to the speak pipe on the show notes page.
Awesome, and we look forward to hearing from new folks as well, and those of you who didn't have time to do a report, we look forward to hearing from you next time. Cheers, guys.
Beekeeping news you can use.
And this time we have some bad news, eh, Dale?
Yes, the story coming out of South Dakota as bees die off, South Dakota beekeepers face industry's darkest days. Things are not going well for beekeepers in South Dakota. Habitat loss and terrible winter losses are causing big issues. And what's the quote from the article?
It says South Dakota beekeepers are among the largest players in the U.S. pollination and honey industries. They are reeling from a nationwide spike in honeybee colony losses that has the potential to affect 90 different agricultural crops across the country and could raise the price of fruit, vegetables and nuts if the problem worsens.
Well, that's terrible. This is a story out of the argusleader.com news site, and they have an audio here. We'll just play that.
The decline of wild bees could lead to a collapse of the ecosystem, according to a report from Newsweek. While the population of domesticated bees, notably the western honeybee, is slowly rising, a few species of native bees, such as bumblebees, are classified at risk of extinction. Most effort to save bees focuses on the honeybee. But Robert Jagir, an assistant professor of biology and biotechnology at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute, argues the importance of bee diversity. Jagir told Newsweek, quote, "If we start removing our native bees, we have a problem because they have a unique relationship with native flowering plants that is holding up the ecosystems." Explaining that bees pollinate the plants that produce fruit, that feed birds, that are food for other mammals, Jagir continued, quote, "When we start to lose species in that context, we're talking about extinction and the loss of components which will eventually lead to ecosystem collapse." Jagir suggested customizing bee conservation efforts to different species instead of a one-size-fits-all model, and warned against the use of pesticides, which affect bee health.
Heavy-duty stuff there, eh, Dale?
Yes, indeed. And, the beekeepers are saying there the farmers have ploughed up more pasture to plant row crops, such as corn and soybeans, and they're getting much better at killing pollinating flowers or killing flowering plants.
Yeah, that's very true. And when you read this article, which is a very long article, I feel really sad for our environment. When I see that with all this, when they say plant row crops, that's monocultures, just total monocultures. And, it really is getting me down, this thing. So it also says some things like the commercial beekeepers lost 70% or more of their bees last winter.
That's shocking, isn't it? How could any business survive that kind of loss?
I don't think it's sustainable. I think that the reality is that it will be, it's just scary.
Well, Brent Eddy, co-owner of Eddy Honey Farms, says his company lost so many bees that the business was forced to shutter its beekeeping operation in Nebraska and lay off employees.
Forced to shutter? What does that mean?
Shut it. You put shutters over a building that's been abandoned. It means
okay.
To shut it down or close it. That must be a South Dakota thing.
Okay. And that was in Nebraska, and they laid off employees. So that's very bad, isn't it?
Yes, and hive production has fallen about 50% over the past 15 to 20 years. And I suspect, they say it's to do with loss of habitat, and also I think it's because beekeepers are trying to replace lost colonies. They're spending all their time doing splits and creating more colonies and not getting out there and finding honey.
Yeah, I think that's, if the land isn't being looked after, if it's not being fed properly and it's being constantly, they talk about the fungicides and the pesticides that they're using. I think if they keep doing that kind of thing, the land is just going to end up have no nutritional value for anything. And
it just becomes inert, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then if you have a bee that's getting a pesticide or a fungicide, and the fungicides actually kill bacteria in the land itself, and then the insects that are on the land, they will start dying, like worms and everything like that. And then if the worms get poisoned, then you get a bird come along and pull that worm out of the ground. What's going to happen next? The bird's going to get poisoned. Then if the bird gets poisoned, then we're not going to have anybody singing us awake in the morning.
The environment's all connected, isn't it? It can't sustain this any longer, can we?
No, and I don't think they are feeding. They talk about feeding, the populations, but the reality is the food that we're eating is not healthy for us. And if you put corn in a processed product and then you expect us to get nutrition from it, it's not happening. So we really need to tell these companies that make all this food, if you call it food, that they have to stop. They have to diversify their plantings. They need to rotate their crops. They need to use proper land management techniques and stop using chemicals that are going to cause a big collapse in the whole way that the earth and the ground and the trees and plants work. It's just terrible.
Well, I think these losses are unsustainable, and this is going to be causing loss of beekeepers. That's what's going to happen. Like, commercial beekeepers aren't going to be able to sustain their livelihoods. I think that's the biggest concern, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But as you just said, it is all connected. If you have a failure in one part if you're getting native bees that die, then there's a big problem going on because they rely on all the natural native flora and fauna. And if that's not there or it's poisoning them, that they will start to disappear.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a great article, guys, so I encourage you to read it. It's on the argusleader.com, and the link is in the show notes. And have a read, and then leave some comments on kiwi.bz/148 and tell us what you think.
I think that maybe people, whether they're beekeepers or whatever, who listen to this show, take a moment to just be and have a look at the food that they're buying. And if it's processed food, go and have a look at the ingredients that are on the pack. I guarantee that there'll be corn in there, palm, kernate or whatever. There'll be maize, there'll be some wheat derivative, there will be soy, and they're all crops that are not healthily grown.
Well, my grandmother used to tell me, never eat anything you can't pronounce.
Exactly. I'm not sure that generation really will know what's happening in the world today. No. It'd be beyond them to think that we do that to, our consumers or the people, the customers who buy our products. Why would we poison them like that? Why would we grow crops on land that is getting so sick it can't sustain itself?
It sounds like happy talk to me, Dale.
Anyway, I think, guys, if you've got a bit of land, go and plant some crops.
Bee-friendly crops.
Bee-friendly and, just grow your own vegetables so that you get nice, healthy diet, and lots of fruit trees and, I can see it now. Awesome.
And now the next story is about an Iranian startup designed Smart Beehives. This is a story from Iran. And a new startup is producing a smart beehive monitoring system for the first time in Iran. So what's the blurb of this one?
An Iranian startup team from Sharif University of Technology has managed to design and manufacture a smart beehive, which can help farmers improve their productivity. ISNA reported on Wednesday. So their productivity in terms of what their bees do, I guess, is what that means?
Yes, indeed. This is a story out of the from the TehranTimes.com. Yeah, because it's basically like Broodminder or all these these monitoring ones they have.
Yeah.
It does things like the weight and the temperature inside the hive, and this is a new development from Iran. I mean, it's not a new thing because a lot of companies are doing this, aren't they?
Yeah, it's the startup team is headed by Armin Rezaizadeh and Mehdi Shadra, and these smart beehives are not only transmit data to beekeepers but also can act as a thief catcher, which is pretty good.
Yeah, and it includes a microphone, doesn't it, which detects the presence of the queen bee, fertilization, and burglary.
Okay, so...
And it's registered, and it detects analysing voices.
Okay, I wondered how they did that, but that sounds interesting. I just wonder if they can actually, still working on this product, whether they can hear the footsteps of the Varroa destructor mite as it comes into the hive.
Well, I don't know, but I know this company in America called Broodminder are working on a system where they can actually count mites from a photograph of the inside of the hive.
That would be like that face recognition software stuff, eh?
Yeah, but it's mite recognition.
Very interesting.
But how does that work in a dark hive? Interesting.
Very good point.
And how do they analyse the voices of a burglar? Do they wait for them to go swag, 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 steal, steal? I don't know. How does that work?
Grab this, grab that.
I was emailing Armin, had a couple of conversations with him, and hopefully we can get him on the show in the future to talk more about this project. And it also, on a personal note, it'd be great to talk to someone from Iran and how they keep bees there, eh? Yeah,
that would really be interesting. Be interesting also about their land management. How do they manage that?
Because the photo in the article there looks a lot of snow-capped mountains, though, so it must get quite cold there, I guess.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I just always imagine it to be really hot there. Hot and dry.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But, this is a great project, so check out that article. And we had some feedback from John Thompson. What does he say?
He said, I'd like to know just what information is transmitted to the cell user. So that'll be, I think that's a good point. I mean, exactly how does it really help production and all those things? So a bit more information, I think, would be good.
Well, hopefully we'll ask Armin about that if he gets in touch. And I think it does do it sends information about the weight, temperature, and humidity all analysed. So the weight would be good. You could tell when there's a flow on, couldn't you? Because the weight of the hive would be going up. You could also tell when a swarm leaves because the weight would go down.
Yeah, well, they reckon that the temperature goes up too when they're raising queens, so you could maybe see swarming patterns or whatever.
Well, the noise of the hive changes, as you know, and when the swarm's about to happen, don't they? They start making a louder noise. So, but I think they could only predict it about 20 minutes before, so it's a bit useless if you're 10 miles away, isn't it?
I think one of the things as I was reading this is that my concern would be that they think that they'll rely on the technology and that won't actually go in and inspect the hives as much as they should. So that was my only thought on this one.
Okay, well, hopefully if Armin gets back to us, we can have a conversation with him. And if you've got any questions for this research team, you can get in touch at kiwi.bz/148.
Okay, I just want to, Gary, before we go, just say to those of you who are coming into autumn and early winter sort of symptoms, are not sure whether the temperatures or whatever are going on. So the things that you'll be looking at this point would be wintering down your hives. If you've got Varroa in your country, then you need to get all your treatments done and check the honey stores, all those basic things we talked about before, and don't leave too much space for the bees if they can't manage it. And one of the things I like to do in winter is have all the hives up on stands so they're not on the cold earth and they can get a bit of wind underneath or air that flows so that the hiveware doesn't get too damp. But some of you will be wrapping your hives, I guess, and that kind of thing.
For Christmas.
Indeed. Anyway, we're sort of starting into our season. We've got our classes coming on, and our first one starts this Sunday, eh, Dale?
I know. Did you realise, guys, you can actually learn from the amazing Margaret. So check it out.
I do my best.
I'll be in here editing podcasts.
That's right. So, guys, thanks for joining us today. Sorry we didn't give you any roving reports, but, it's a changeable time for you guys, and we're still trying to get into spring. But hopefully next podcast we've got some more interesting stuff coming on and some more news from our roving reporters.
Absolutely, and we had that last week a Q&A show. Just wondering what you think of that.
Awesome. I had fun doing it.
Yeah, me too. Who helped us bringing this show to you?
Thanks for listening to our show, and thanks to all our supporters who support us through the Patreon service. This week we would like to thank
Nathan Buzzinger Beekeeping from Buzzinger Beekeeping,
Carolyn Sloan,
Finn's Bees,
Michelle Lashy,
Buzzed Honey, Humane Bee Relocation from Buzzed Honey,
Cameron Miskin,
Chris Palgrave from 3hairshoney.com,
Irene Townsend,
Boris Brockman,
Trish Streeton,
Scott Wiltshire,
Greg Parr from Parr's Products,
Karen Shields,
Christopher Brown from Sheffield.
That's right. Michelle Scheidler from ScheidlerRanch.com.
Dan McGivern.
John Paff from Tulip Tree Honeybee and Jeannie.
Sana Wynne Lewis.
Mandy Shaw from Beekeeping Confidential. Paul Brill.
Robin O'Connell.
Lisa Morrissey.
Tim Wilcox.
Goodney Hunter.
Malcolm Sanford from apisenterprises.com.
Glenn Gothorpe.
Tony Lum from meadinnewzealand.com. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. You're all amazing.
Shout out to our new supporters.
Yes, thanks to Glenn Gothorpe and Paul Brill for starting to support us this month. Thanks, Glenn and Paul.
Awesome.
And be like Paul and Glenn and start supporting what we do.
Especially if you find something of value.
If you love what we do and find it useful, you can support us too. Visit kiwi.bz/banana. Yes, and the show notes for this page are kiwi.bz/148. And just a bit of sad news here from the Hawke's Bay. We just learnt that beekeeper and author Janet Luke has passed away last week, so we're just sending out our condolences to her family and friends. She was a great lady and she'll be missed. Everyone that had the pleasure to meet her, and she came to Kiwimana HQ, didn't she? And we talked about bees for a few hours, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And the thing that I liked about Janet is that she was very brave, and she also encouraged a lot of beekeepers to do top bar beekeeping, and she was very passionate about that. And yeah, we'll miss her.
We will. Okay, guys, we'll be back in a couple of weeks on the show, and we'll leave it with you. Thank you for joining us this week.
See ya!
Yes, in this episode we learn about the...
Kerry, what are you doing?
Habitat lofts?